I never imagined that 15 years of dedication would end with a cold smile from my sister across the table. I can still smell the fresh dough I had prepared earlier that day, the same recipe that turned our small family restaurant into one of the most sought after in town. Comfort Kitchen, our restaurant, had just completed its best season yet, with lines stretching around the block every weekend. It was a Thursday night, after closing time. The restaurant still held the warmth from the ovens and the aroma of the day's dishes. My father had called an important family meeting. That should have been my first warning sign. He never held meetings, always leaving everything in my hands since I took over management when he fell ill. Sitting at the restaurant's main table, the one I had chosen myself when we renovated the place 3 years ago, I watched my family gather. My father, Richard, still carried that authoritative air, even after the heart attack that nearly took him 5 years ago. Beside him, my mother Sarah avoided my gaze, nervously fidgeting with her napkin. She always did that when something bothered her. And then there was Ashley, my younger sister, fresh from her MBA at Harvard, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emma," my father began, his voice oddly formal. "You've done an adequate job with the restaurant all these years?" Adequate? My stomach tightened. I had turned a struggling restaurant into a business making over $800,000 a month. Adequate wasn't exactly the word I expected to hear. "But," he continued, clearing his throat, "it's time for changes. Your sister Ashley is back from her MBA, and we've decided she'll take over full management of Comfort Kitchen." The air seemed to vanish from the room. I looked at Ashley, who maintained that rehearsed smile. The same sister who had never set foot in the kitchen, who had spent the last 5 years in Boston while I woke up at 5 a.m. every day to receive suppliers. "Dad," my voice came out firmer than I expected. "I built this restaurant. I turned it into what it is today. And for that, we're grateful," Ashley interrupted, her smile widening. "But now I need my rightful place. After all," she paused dramatically, "Dad left everything to me in the will." The silence that followed those words felt like a ton of weight. 15 years. 15 years of work, sweat, and tears flashed before my eyes in seconds. I remembered the day my father had the heart attack. I had just turned 24 and was about to accept a job at a major restaurant chain in Chicago. But Comfort Kitchen needed me. Back then, the restaurant could barely pay its bills. It was a typical roadside American diner, the kind that had been serving the same burgers and fries for decades. While Ashley was in college, living her full college experience, I spent sleepless nights studying restaurant management, developing new menus, modernizing processes. "Emma, dear," my mother finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Your sister has an MBA now. She studied administration at the best schools." "And I lived administration in practice," I cut in, feeling the anger bubble up. "Do you remember what this place was like? Do you remember we were 2 months away from closing?" Richard, it was hard to call him Dad at that moment, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Of course, he remembered. The overdue bills, the suppliers threatening to cut us off, the bank pressuring us to repay the loan. I had kept every note, every collection notice, every legal threat letter, not out of bitterness, but to never forget where we had come from. "The past is the past," Ashley said, waving her hand as if swatting away an inconvenient fly. "Now we need to think about the future. I have big plans to modernize this place. I've even thought about a complete renovation, you know? Something more contemporary." My heart froze. The word contemporary from Ashley's lips sounded like a death sentence for everything I had built. Our customers didn't come here for contemporary. They came for the home-cooked meals I had perfected over the years, for the cozy atmosphere I had created, for the staff I had personally trained. "What about Rachel?" I asked, thinking of our head chef who had been with us for 12 years. "And Mike?" who's been running our dining room for a decade. What's the plan for them?" Ashley shrugged, that casual gesture that always deeply irritated me. "Changes are necessary, Emma. Not everyone will fit the new vision." It was at that moment I realized this wasn't just a simple management change. It was a coup, carefully planned and executed while I was too busy making the restaurant thrive. I looked around at the walls I had painted myself, at the pictures I had handpicked, each one telling a part of our story. "When?" I asked, my voice low. "When did you decide this?" "Emma," my father began, but Ashley interrupted him. "6 months ago," she said, pulling a folder from her designer bag. "When I started my MBA capstone project, I did a full case study on Comfort Kitchen. Dad sent me all the numbers, reports, everything. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. 6 months. While I was celebrating our best quarter ever, while I was expanding our menu and training new staff, they were planning to remove me from the helm. Did you know about this?" I turned to my mother, who still couldn't look me in the eye. Her silence was answer enough. "Actually," Ashley continued, opening the folder with that air of superiority only Harvard could give, "I've already started some administrative changes. Starting Monday, all employees will report directly to me. And we need to discuss the transfer of passwords, bank access, contracts." "Transfer?" I cut in. "Do you really think I'm just going to hand everything over like that?" "Emma," my father finally found his authoritative voice, "don't make this difficult. You always knew the restaurant would stay in the family." "Family?" The word came out as a bitter laugh. "What family, Dad? The one that left me alone here for 15 years while Ashley traveled the world? The one that's stabbing me in the back now?" "Don't be dramatic." Ashley rolled her eyes. "You played your part, took care of the place while I prepared properly. Now it's time for the professionals to take over." That word, professionals, was the last straw. I stood up slowly, feeling heat rise through my body. 15 years of memories flashed through my mind. The early mornings preparing sauces, the Christmases spent doing inventory, the birthdays celebrated between orders and deliveries. That night I couldn't sleep. The ticking of the clock seemed to mock me as I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that meeting. At 3 a.m., I got up and went to my home office. I opened my laptop and began reviewing every document, every contract, every little detail I had built over the years. That's when I noticed something Ashley, with all her MBA knowledge, hadn't considered. Something even my father, in his haste to hand the restaurant over to his favorite daughter, hadn't thought to check. By 5 a.m., my usual wake-up time, I was already at the restaurant. Rachel, our head chef, was the first to arrive, as always. "Emma?" She frowned when she saw me sitting in the office. "Are you okay? You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I replied, gesturing to the chair in front of me. "Rachel, we need to talk." Over the next 40 minutes, I explained everything. With every word, I watched Rachel's face, more a friend than an employee, shift from surprise to indignation and then to anger. "They can't do this," she protested. "This place is yours. You built this." "Legally, they can," I replied, a small smile forming at the corner of my lips. "But there are some things they don't know." Mike arrived soon after, and the conversation repeated itself. Then, the other employees started arriving. Sarah from the pastry section, Tom from the bar, Janet from reception. People who weren't just staff, but family. The real family I had built. "What are we going to do?" Mike asked, his voice a mix of concern and determination. "Do you trust me?" I asked, looking at each face in that room. The answer was unanimous. Of course they trusted me. They had trusted me for years, and that wasn't going to change now. Then, I opened a folder on my computer. "Let me show you what Ashley doesn't know about how a restaurant really works." On Monday, Ashley arrived at 9:30 a.m., wearing an executive suit that looked ridiculously out of place in a professional kitchen. She carried an expensive leather folder and an air of superiority that made my stomach churn. "Good morning, team," she announced, as if she were giving a presentation at Harvard. "Today, we begin a new era at Comfort Kitchen. First, we'll have some process changes." I watched silently as she paraded her innovations. New digital ordering system, reduced menu, minimalist decor. Every word out of her mouth felt like a slap in the face of everything we had built. "What about the traditional recipes?" Rachel asked, her voice controlled. "The dishes our customers love?" "Oh, that." Ashley waved her hand dismissively. "We're modernizing the menu. Less comfort food, more fusion cuisine. I've already hired a culinary consultant from New York." I saw Rachel's face harden, but she just nodded. Everyone there knew their role. The show had to go on. Over the next 2 weeks, Ashley tried to implement her changes. Tried is the key word. At every step, she encountered small obstacles. The new ordering system didn't integrate with our inventory control. The suppliers seemed to have trouble adapting to the new schedule she imposed. The consultant from New York faced scheduling issues to get started. "Emma," she cornered me one day, clearly frustrated. "I need the access codes for the old system, and the supplier spreadsheets." "Of course," I smiled, handing her a folder. "It's all here." What she didn't know was that those were just the basic details. The real contracts, the relationships I had built over the years, the special agreements with suppliers, all of that was stored somewhere else. At night, after Ashley left, always promptly at 5 p.m., our real operation began. Rachel and the kitchen team documented every traditional recipe, every special technique we had developed. Mike cataloged our extensive wine cellar, especially the rare bottles I had collected over the years. "She wants to clean out the basement next week," Mike informed me, worried. "She said wine doesn't fit the new concept." "Don't worry," I replied, showing him some documents. "Those bottles don't belong to the restaurant. They're part of my personal import business." Ashley had no idea, but for years I had operated not just as a manager, but as an independent businesswoman. Every improvement I made, every piece of equipment I bought, every special bottle of wine, it was all under my personal company's name, not the restaurant's. One night, as we reviewed our next steps, Rachel surprised me with a question. "Why? Don't we open our own place? You have the knowledge, we have the experience." "Not yet," I replied, checking some emails on my phone. "First, let's let Ashley understand exactly what it means to run a real restaurant." By the end of the 3rd week, the first signs started to show. Reservations began to decline. Customers left disappointed with the new modern menu. Suppliers started demanding upfront payments, citing changes in credit policies. Ashley was beginning to realize that a Harvard MBA wasn't enough to run a restaurant. But the worst was yet to come. It was on a busy Thursday that everything started to fall apart. Ashley was in her office, my old office, when the first serious problem arose. The consulting chef she had hired from New York finally showed up, but not in the way she expected. "Miss Ashley," Janet from reception called over the intercom, "there's a process server here with a subpoena." The chef was suing the restaurant for breach of contract. Apparently, Ashley had signed an agreement with astronomical penalties without reading the fine print. Typical of someone who knows theory, but lacks practice. "Emma!" she shouted from the office. "Get in here now." I walked in calmly, finding my sister red-faced with papers scattered all over the desk. "Did you know about this?" she asked, waving the legal document. "Why didn't you warn me about the penalty clauses?" "You didn't ask me to review the contract," I replied simply. "I assumed with your MBA you knew how to handle this." But that was just the beginning. That same afternoon, our main meat supplier announced they could no longer honor the special prices we had enjoyed for years. "Company policy," they said. "The new price? nearly 40% higher. But we can't pay that. Ashley protested over the phone. We have an agreement. The agreement was with Emma's company, the supplier explained. She brokered all the purchases. Without her, we revert to standard pricing. I saw the exact moment it started to sink in. Ashley spent the entire afternoon reviewing contracts, only to discover that many of the restaurant's most advantageous deals weren't under Comfort Kitchen's name, but under my personal company. What did you do? She asked, her voice a mix of anger and fear. Me? I smiled, leaning against the door. I just ran the business smartly. Isn't that what they teach at Harvard? The next morning, I called a meeting. Not in the office, but in the restaurant's main dining room. Ashley, Mom, Dad, they were all there, along with our full team. The tension in the air was palpable. Before we begin, I said, placing a stack of documents on the table, let me explain a few things about how a restaurant really works. I opened the first file. Here we have the supply contracts, all tied to Emma's Kitchen LLC, my personal company, including our exclusive suppliers for meats, organic vegetables, and imported wines. Ashley grabbed the papers, flipping through them nervously. This doesn't matter. The restaurant is mine now. The building is yours, I corrected. But a restaurant is much more than four walls. I moved to the next document. Here are our recipes, all registered and patented. Even that special sauce everyone loves? Trademarked under my company. I saw my father pale. He knew how important that sauce was. It accounted for 30% of our sales. And there's more, I continued, picking up another file. Our management system? Custom developed just for us. Guess who owns the rights? You can't do this, Ashley exploded. Dad, tell her she can't. Richard looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Emma, why? Why? I repeated calmly. Because while you were planning to push me out, I was planning to protect myself. Every investment I made, every improvement, every innovation, it was all done through my company, not the restaurant. You can keep Comfort Kitchen, but without Emma's Kitchen LLC, all you have is an empty building. Sarah, our mother, finally found her voice. What do you want, Emma? I smiled, picking up the last document from the stack. I'm glad you asked. I have a purchase offer here. Fair market value for the building and equipment. You keep the money the restaurant has generated so far, and I take over the operation. This is blackmail. Ashley slammed the table, her face red with anger. You're trying to force us to sell. Blackmail? I shook my head. No, this is business. Something you should have learned at Harvard. Let's break it down. Without my supplier contracts, your costs go up by 40%. Without my patented recipes, you lose our most popular dishes. Without my team... I paused, looking around the room. Well, you'll have to train new people from scratch. Rachel stepped forward. We're going with Emma. We've already signed. With her company. Mike also spoke up. All of us are. The entire team. I saw the exact moment my father understood the gravity of the situation. His eyes scanned the dining room, the same dining room that had been on the verge of bankruptcy 15 years ago. Now it was one of the most profitable restaurants in the city. How much? He asked, his voice weary. I pushed the contract toward him. Market value. Not $1 more, not $1 less. Everything documented and appraised by an independent firm. Ashley grabbed the paper, her eyes widening as she saw the amount. This is less than half of what the restaurant is worth. The restaurant with my operation is worth much more, I corrected. But you're only selling the building and basic equipment, and you have 24 hours to decide. 4 hours, my mother choked. Emma, that's more time than you gave me. Cut in. You plan to take everything from me for 6 months. I'm giving you 24 hours for a simple business decision. I opened my laptop, showing a presentation. If you refuse, here's my plan B. I've already rented a space 3 blocks from here. My team is coming with me. My suppliers are coming with me. Our recipes are coming with me. And our loyal customers? Well, I pressed a key and showed the restaurant's Instagram page. Hundreds of comments from regular customers, all shocked by the recent menu changes, all asking why their favorite dishes had disappeared. Next week, I opened the new restaurant, I continued. With the same team, the same recipes, the same suppliers. The only difference will be the address. And you? You'll be left with an empty building, bills to pay, and a Harvard-educated sister who's never fried an egg in her life. Ashley paled. For the first time since she returned, her arrogant smile had completely disappeared. My father stared at the contract, his hands slightly trembling. "Did you plan this from the beginning?" my mother asked quietly. "No," I answered honestly. "I just prepared. Because while you saw only a daughter taking care of the family business, I was building my own empire." They signed the contract in less than 12 hours. They had no choice. Deep down, I think they knew I was right. Ashley would never be able to run the restaurant on her own. 3 months later, I'm sitting in the same spot where it all began, but now it's different. Comfort Kitchen remains exactly as it always was, except for the sign at the entrance that now reads Emma's Kitchen. The lines still stretch around the block on weekends, the aromas are still the same, and most importantly, our family, the real family I built here, remains united. Rachel is now a minority partner, as is Mike. They deserve it. They always did. Ashley went back to New York, apparently to pursue a PhD or something. Dad and Mom, well, they tried to make a reservation last week. "Table for 2, Mom said. On the phone, her voice small. Under Sarah Miller, I asked Janet to seat them at the best table, to prepare the best wine, to serve the best food. Not for them, but for me. I wanted them to see exactly what I had built, what they almost destroyed, and what they could never touch again." When they finished their meal, I left a note on the bill. "Compliments of the house. Signed, the daughter who was never good enough." Today, as I review the month's numbers that are 3 times higher than during the old restaurant's time, I can't help but smile. On the wall of my office, I've framed the napkin where I first jotted down recipes 15 years ago. Next to it is the purchase contract signed by my father. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, if I miss family. The truth? Family isn't just blood. Family is the people who wake up at 5 a.m. with you, who celebrate your victories, who stand by your side when everyone else doubted you. Comfort Kitchen was my father's dream. But Emma's Kitchen, that's my empire, and no one will ever try to take it from me again. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer to serve it with a pinch of success and a dash of justice. After all, that's always been my special recipe.